Story 1. She filed the report before it even happened. This happened to me in 2019, in a small apartment I'd just moved into outside of Baltimore. It was the first place that was really mine. No roommates, no shared bathrooms. Just a one-bedroom on the third floor of a dull brick building near the train tracks. It wasn't much, but I loved it. I worked from home at the time, freelance transcription, so most of my day was quiet. That first week, I took the time to arrange everything just the way I liked. Kitchen utensils stacked left to right. Books organized by spine height. I'm not OCD or anything, just particular. I like knowing where things are. It helps me feel grounded. But about 2 weeks in, I noticed something small. My keys weren't where I left them. I always put them on the ceramic dish near the entryway, a habit so ingrained I didn't even think about it. But one morning, they were on the kitchen counter. I stood there for a good 30 seconds, just staring at them, thinking maybe I'd absent-mindedly dropped them there while unpacking groceries. That's what I told myself anyway. The next day, it was the toothpaste. I kept it in the medicine cabinet above the sink, and I remembered using it the night before. But that morning, it was on the rim of the bathtub. That one really got to me. It didn't feel like forgetfulness. It felt like I was being nudged, not loudly, just enough to notice, but not enough to be sure. By the fourth time, I started keeping track. I bought a small notebook and wrote things down. Coffee mug in sink, not drying rack. Light in closet left on. Bathroom mat turned the wrong way. Each one of these things on its own could be nothing, but the accumulation was harder to ignore. I told a friend about it and she laughed, said I was just stressed from the move. Said maybe I was doing these things in my sleep. That possibility stuck in my head, so I left a spoon on the stove handle one night, on purpose, just to see. The next morning, it was on the floor. Still, no forced entry, no scratches on the door. I checked all the windows, locked. I started sleeping with the bedroom door closed, something I hadn't done in years. Then one night around 2 a.m., I heard something shift. It was subtle, a soft bump, like something being placed gently on a hard surface. I held my breath and just listened. Nothing. When I finally got up, the bathroom door, which I always kept open, was half closed, not fully shut, just pulled in slightly. I couldn't remember if I had done it. That was the worst part. Not knowing if you're imagining things is scarier than knowing something's wrong. The next day I went out and bought a small camera, one of those plug-in types with cloud storage and motion alerts. I only had enough money for one, so I placed it in the living room, angled toward the hallway. That night, I slept badly. I kept checking the app. No alerts. Nothing moved. I almost felt silly until the following afternoon. I was reviewing the footage, not really expecting to find anything. But around 3:14 a.m., there was a motion trigger. The footage showed the living room completely dark, and then something very faint. The camera's night vision flicked on, and for a split second, I saw the door to the closet sway. Just slightly, as if it had been nudged from the inside. There was no sound, no shape, just the movement. I paused the frame, re-watched it, over and over. The next day I filed a report. The officer was polite but skeptical. I showed him the footage. He watched it twice, then shrugged, said it could have been air pressure or a draft. He looked around the apartment and said there were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of tampering, just a few things out of place. But I knew what was normal and what wasn't. He said he'd file a report anyway, just in case. That phrase stuck with me, just in case of what? I changed the locks that evening, but that wasn't what I needed to change, because things didn't stop. They got worse. It happened 4 nights later. I had just finished brushing my teeth. The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the faint buzz of a streetlight outside. I turned off the bathroom light and padded down the hall toward my room. Right as I passed the living room, I heard it. A click. Not loud, Not sharp, just soft, mechanical, like the sound of a door latch slipping into place. I stopped. My body went cold. It came from the closet. I didn't move. I stood there in the dark hallway, heart pounding, straining to hear anything else. But there was only silence. That silence. It was like a weight, not peaceful, not still, oppressive, like something was waiting, not gone. I backed up slowly into my room and shut the door. Not slammed. Quietly, deliberately. I locked it and turned on the bedside lamp. I sat on the bed and just listened. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Nothing. Eventually, I drifted into a shallow, fitful sleep. The next morning, I walked into the living room. Nothing seemed out of place, except the closet door. It was locked. I never locked it. I didn't even know it had a lock. I stood in front of it and just stared. I reached out, tested the knob. It wouldn't turn. I went to the kitchen and came back with a flashlight, shined it through the thin gap under the door. There was something on the floor inside, a slip of paper. I couldn't read it, but I saw the corner of it and the edge of what looked like a footprint. I called the landlord. He came by that afternoon, annoyed and skeptical. I didn't tell him everything, just said I thought someone might have broken into the closet somehow. Maybe a past tenant had left something in there. He jimmied it open with a screwdriver. Inside was mostly empty, just an old broom, a dustpan, and a few tangled wires from a long disconnected phone line. No paper, no footprint. I stared at the floor for a long time. Then I noticed something else. A small square patch of dustless floor in the back corner, like something had been sitting there for a long time, recently removed. The landlord saw me looking at it. "You want me to replace the lock?" he asked. I nodded. After he left, I put a chair under the bedroom doorknob. That night, the motion camera triggered again. I checked the footage in the morning. Nothing moved, except the hallway light. It flickered on for a few seconds, then off. That switch was manual. I didn't sleep again for 3 nights. I moved out 2 months later, broke my lease, paid the penalty, but I didn't tell anyone the full reason why. A week before I left, I found out something that still makes my stomach drop. It started with a smell, a faint chemical scent in the hallway outside my door, like industrial cleaner. Not strong, just present. I asked the building manager about it. He said one of the old maintenance guys had come by to retrieve some tools from storage. Said he used to live in the building years ago before my time. Said his name was Derek. I remembered the name, because I found it written on the back of an old envelope I'd pulled from the closet the day after it was unlocked. The envelope was blank, except for that name, Derek. I hadn't told the manager about the closet, about the lock, about the footprint. But somehow, it all connected in my head in a way I didn't want it to. I called the police again. This time I asked them to check if there were any prior reports from the building, any break-ins, any trespassing. They found something, a report filed 6 years prior, same unit, woman in her 30s, complained about missing items, light switches turning on, closet doors opening, no forced entry, no fingerprints, no arrest, just a report, buried. I asked if they had a suspect. The name Derek came up. A former maintenance worker, fired for violating tenant privacy, never charged. He had access to master keys. I asked how that wasn't followed up on. The officer on the phone hesitated, then said there was no evidence. She moved out. We closed the file. I asked if it was possible he still had a copy of the key. He didn't answer. I packed that night. I didn't sleep. Before I left for good, I checked the camera feed one last time. Nothing for days. Then, on the final night, at 4:17 a.m., the hallway light came on, stayed on for 13 seconds, then clicked off. I never went back. A month later, I got a letter from the police. Derek had been arrested, unrelated charges, possession of stolen property. Among the items recovered was a set of master keys. One was labeled with my unit number. I called the officer and asked if they could connect him to the break-ins. He said, maybe, but we can't prove intent. He didn't use the key while under employment. There's no forced entry. It wouldn't hold up. Then he said something else. Honestly, it's lucky you moved. That's the last time I spoke to them. I still think about that click, the latch, the lock that wasn't supposed to be locked, and how my brain told me something was wrong, long before anyone else believed it. I filed the report before it even happened, but that didn't stop it. It just proved I wasn't imagining things. Story 2. He kept showing up, but never broke the law. This happened to me in 2022, when I was living in a mid-sized city outside Sacramento. I was working at a non-profit downtown, nothing fancy, just admin work, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. I lived about a 25-minute walk from the office, which I preferred over driving. I liked the rhythm of it, the predictable pace. Same sidewalk cracks, same trees, same crosswalks. The first time I noticed him was in March. It was raining that day. I had my hood up, earbuds in, head down. I was about 2 blocks from my apartment when I passed a man standing under a bus shelter. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't watching traffic. He was watching me, just still, just present. I only saw him for a second, and then I kept walking. But something about the way he stood, hands in his pockets, eyes level, completely still, it stuck in my head. The next morning he was there again, same spot, same posture. The day after that too. I told myself it was just coincidence. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe that was his bus route. It's a public sidewalk. He's allowed to stand there, but something shifted in me. I started crossing to the other side of the street when I approached that block. I stopped wearing my earbuds. I stopped wearing bright colors. I felt myself getting smaller. Every day he was there. Always early, always alone. He wasn't threatening. He never approached, never said a word. But he watched. One morning I stopped and stared back, just to see if he'd flinch. He didn't. He didn't even shift his gaze. It was like he wasn't looking at me exactly, just through me. I didn't know how to talk about it. When I mentioned it to a coworker, she laughed and said maybe I had a secret admirer. I tried to smile. But I stopped sleeping well after that, because I started feeling it other places, not just near my apartment, at the grocery store, near the corner cafe I stopped at once a week. At first I thought it was paranoia, but then it became pattern. He didn't follow me. That's what I kept telling myself. He just showed up, ahead of me, on parallel sidewalks, across the street, always visible, never close enough to accuse. I changed my route, once, then twice. I even took the long way through a parking garage just to see if he'd still be there. He was. 3 levels above, leaning against the railing, just standing there. He never smiled, never waved. I called the non-emergency police line once. The dispatcher asked if he'd made threats. I said no. Has he followed you home? No, but he's always there. Do you know his name? No. Has he trespassed? No. Then unfortunately there's not much we can do. I hung up and stared at the wall for a long time. That weekend, I stayed inside. Didn't go anywhere, didn't even open the blinds, but on Sunday evening I couldn't help it. I peeked, and there he was, across the street, sitting on the bench at the park entrance, eating a sandwich, watching my building. He never broke the law, but he broke everything else. I started documenting everything: time, location, his clothing, distance. At first I thought it would help me build a case, but over time I realized it was more about control. If I couldn't stop him, maybe I could understand him. His patterns were subtle. He rotated between 3 jackets: navy, tan, dark green. He always wore jeans. His shoes were grey, running-type sneakers with a red logo I couldn't identify. No phone, no bag, nothing to distract him. Some days he was closer, some days farther, but always just far enough to seem like a stranger. I tried walking with other people from work. That worked. for about a week. Then one morning, I saw him further up the block, half hidden behind a delivery truck, not watching me, watching the person I was with. After that, I stopped asking anyone to walk with me. He never took pictures, never said anything, but he looked, and that was enough. He started appearing in new places, a bookstore I visited once a month, the library on the other side of town, a hardware store I only went to twice, places I didn't expect him to be, places I didn't remember ever talking about. He wasn't following me in the traditional sense. He was collecting me, collecting my habits, my roots, my preferences. I tried to trap him once, left work early without telling anyone, took the back exit, caught a rideshare 3 blocks away, got dropped off in a different neighborhood. An hour later, I saw him across the street from the cafe where I was hiding, just leaning against a fence, sipping a drink from a brown paper bag. I stopped trying to outmaneuver him after that. That night, I deleted all my social media. I unplugged my smart speakers, turned off location tracking on my phone, started using cash only. It didn't change anything. I thought about buying a weapon. I even went to a shop and held a stun gun in my hand, but I couldn't bring myself to buy it. I started having dreams, always the same shape. Him standing in the middle of the sidewalk, not moving, not talking, just there, watching. I didn't know if I was more afraid of what he would do or what I would do, because part of me wanted to walk straight up to him and scream, but I never did, because I knew what the police would say. He hasn't touched you. He hasn't broken the law. Maybe you're imagining things. So I kept walking, kept shrinking, kept scanning every block before I stepped onto it. He wasn't chasing me, he was erasing me. It was late October when I finally heard his voice. I had worked from home that day. A storm was rolling through, and the office had gone remote. I didn't go outside once. I didn't even look out the window. I thought maybe he'd skip a day. Around 7 p.m., I was folding laundry on the floor when I heard it. A soft scrape, like metal brushing against metal. It came from the front door. I froze. Then a voice, low, quiet, muffled. "You missed me today, huh?" 5 words. That was it. But it was his voice, no doubt in my mind. I didn't move. I just sat there on the floor, holding a towel, not breathing. I waited until I heard footsteps, then silence. I got up and crept to the door. There was nothing in the peephole. I opened it a crack and looked down. No note, no package, just the mail slot hanging open slightly. I called the police. This time, I didn't care if they believed me. I told the officer what happened, that someone had been watching me, that he finally spoke. He asked if I had any recordings. I said no. "Did he threaten you?" "No, but he knew I didn't leave the apartment today." The officer paused, then said, "Legally, that's not a threat, but I can file a report." I asked if they could send someone to check the building. They sent a patrol car. They looked around. No sign of anyone. They left after 15 minutes. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found a paperclip wedged into the outer edge of my door frame, slightly bent, like someone had tried to open the lock and failed, or practiced. I called a locksmith that same day, changed the deadbolt, added a chain, installed a second camera inside. It never captured his face, but once, just once, at 2:46 a.m., the feed picked up a shadow across the peephole. Someone stood there for 11 seconds, then left. I didn't wait for him to speak again. I put in my notice at work, moved in with my sister 3 states away, blocked every possible trace of my life online, rerouted my mail, changed my phone number. I didn't even tell most of my friends. They wouldn't understand, because nothing technically happened, nothing criminal, nothing violent, nothing provable, just surveillance, just presence, just the slow, quiet dismantling of my entire sense of safety. 5 words. That's all he said. But I still hear them when I lock my door. "You missed me today, huh? Did you enjoy the content and it made a difference for you? click on Super Thanks and support our work. Story 3. The disappearance inside her own home. This happened in 2018, during the last winter I lived in Vermont. I had bought a modest 2-story house just outside Montpellier. Nothing special. White siding, a sagging porch, thin walls. It was built in the 50s, probably meant for a young family back then. I lived in it alone. I loved that house. It had character. Slightly slanted floorboards, steam heat, a basement that smelled like copper and dirt. It was the first real thing I'd bought for myself. I taught at the local college, so I kept a quiet schedule. Mornings were for grading, afternoons, classes, nights, just me and the sound of wind against the old windows. I don't remember the first sound. That's how it always starts, right? It probably happened a dozen times before I even acknowledged it. Soft creaks when I was upstairs, maybe a muffled thud while I was brushing my teeth. Houses settle, pipes shift, old wood breathes. But the difference was how it began to align with me. For example, one night in February I was reading in bed. It was silent. I sighed, one of those long, unconscious exhales, and almost immediately I heard a knock, one knock, from downstairs, not loud, but deliberate. It was so faint I thought maybe I imagined it. I got up, walked to the top of the stairs and listened. Nothing. I went back to bed. 2 nights later I sneezed in the kitchen, and a second later I heard a dull thump from the ceiling directly above me. The guest room. I was starting to make excuses for things that didn't need them. Maybe the heater kicked on. Maybe I dropped something earlier and didn't notice. But I wasn't dropping things. I wasn't imagining it. One night while brushing my teeth, I leaned forward over the sink, and the moment I lifted my head back up, I heard 3 knocks from somewhere behind the wall. I dropped the toothbrush, just stood there, staring at the mirror. There's a kind of silence that feels different when it follows a sound. Like it's watching you now, like it's waiting. That's how it felt. I started leaving the radio on at night, just static, low, barely audible. It helped me sleep. But I began to notice that sometimes, only sometimes, the static would cut out for a second. Just a blink, then come back. It happened 3 times in 1 week. I tried to tell myself it was interference, old wiring, that kind of thing. But then, one morning I found the crawl space door in the basement slightly ajar. That door had always stuck. I'd tried opening it the year I moved in and couldn't budge it. Now, it was cracked open, 1 inch, maybe 2. I didn't go near it. I just stood at the base of the stairs and stared. Something in me knew. This wasn't noise anymore. This was presence. The next day I bought gloves, a flashlight, and a box cutter. I waited until noon, full daylight, and made my way down to the basement. The crawl space door was still open, just slightly. I knelt in front of it, hands shaking. I pushed. It gave with almost no resistance. Inside was darkness. I turned on the flashlight. The crawl space stretched maybe 20 feet under the house, low ceiling, maybe 4 feet at the tallest point, dirt floor, insulation hanging like vines. It smelled wrong, not rotten, not mold, just stale, lived in. I crouched and crawled inside. Near the back wall I found them, 5 crumpled soda cans, generic brand, dusty but not old. One of them had condensation on it. Beside them, 3 price tags from children's clothing. Ripped off and balled up, no clothes, just the tags. One of them still had a security pin attached. I backed out fast, almost hit my head on the beam above. I stood in the middle of the basement, heart pounding, trying to reason through it. But the part of me that needed logic was quieter now. The part that had tried to explain away the knocks, the thumps, the power glitches. That part had gone still. I called a friend, one of my colleagues from the college. I didn't tell her everything, just said I found something weird and asked if she could come over. She arrived 30 minutes later. I showed her the crawl space. Let her see the cans, the tags. She went pale. Someone's been living here, she said. It was the first time the thought was spoken aloud. She wanted me to call the police right away. I hesitated. It's hard to explain, but I felt like if I involved the police too soon, I'd lose the chance to understand what had happened. We went upstairs. I checked the windows. All locked. Doors secure. Alarm system. Old, but active. Nothing showed signs of entry. That's when it hit me. He hadn't broken in. He'd never left. I slept in a hotel that night. Took my laptop, my phone, a change of clothes, left the lights on in every room. When I came back the next morning, nothing was out of place. But there was a note on the kitchen table, folded twice. No envelope. It said, in blocky handwriting, "You weren't supposed to find that yet." No name, no punctuation, just those words. I called the police. They came, took a statement, checked the crawl space, bagged the cans and tags, dust for prints. They didn't find anything else. No one was there. No signs of recent activity. No fingerprints on the note. The lead officer told me it was probably a squatter, someone hiding in the house during the day, maybe snuck in months ago through a vent or window before I upgraded the locks. But nothing was missing, nothing broken, nothing stolen. Maybe they just like being here, he said. I asked if they could stay overnight. He said no. I asked if they thought the person was dangerous. We can't say, he told me. But whoever it is, they're careful. And that scared me more than anything. Not that he had been here, but that I never noticed. I moved out 2 weeks later, found a rental in a neighboring town, gave away half my things, didn't bring the furniture, didn't bring the radio, just clothes, books, and essentials. Before I left, I asked the detective on the case if there were any updates. He said there wasn't much. No DNA, no prints. They couldn't even confirm how long the crawl space had been in use. But he mentioned something that stuck with me. There's a theory, he said, in criminal psychology about latency. I asked what he meant. It's when someone embeds themselves into a place, not to steal, not to attack, but just to exist, quietly. They live in the seams, the unmonitored places. He looked at me carefully. These types don't always want to be found. They want to belong. That word, belong, it made me sick, because that's exactly how it felt, like he was part of the house, not an invader, a presence. After I moved out, I kept checking news alerts, police logs, neighborhood forums, nothing. It was like he vanished. Or maybe stayed, because a month after I left, I got a voicemail, blocked number. It was 4 seconds of silence. Then a low breath, like someone exhaling directly into the mic. Then a faint sound, a knock, 3 times. Same cadence as the ones I used to hear. I reported it, but the police couldn't trace it. They suggested I change my number. I did, but I still hear it sometimes, when I'm alone, when the wind hits the side of the house just right, when the refrigerator hums and stops. A knock. Faint, behind the wall, or maybe under the floor. I try not to respond, because I don't know what I'm responding to. They said no one had broken in, but sometimes I think that's not the right question. The question isn't how he got in, it's how long he'd been waiting.